Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hive Podcast Network for the premiere episode of What's Buzzin'. A bit of information about this podcast compared to the Backfield Buzz. We'll be doing everything and all things NHL related, one podcast episode per week, maybe more frequently in the future. I'm Kerwin Bootler, joined by Noah Simon and Justin McLean as my guests. And we're going to get into a lot of news around the NHL as things start to heat up with the offseason rolling in and the Stanley Cup finals now complete with the Panthers being the Stanley Cup champions. And that's going to be our first topic of conversation. Gentlemen, Noah, Justin, first question for both of you guys. Was that the best Stanley Cup final that you guys have ever witnessed? Because we're all young guns. Is that the best
Yeah,
final you've ever seen?
I think by far, I can't think of another one that was even close to that. I think it was the best season ever. Best regular season ever. There was so much competition. First round, second round, third round, fourth round, everything in it was amazing.
Yeah, it started from October all the way until almost July. It was just an entertaining season through it. I think Gary Bettman said something like that, where it was one of our best seasons from an entertainment standpoint. And I think he hit the nail right on the head. The Panthers, an incredible team to watch all season. The Oilers almost make a crazy comeback at the end, but then the Panthers ultimately shut it down. It was entertaining for the entirety of it, all the way from October.
Yeah, I think the way just to sum it up altogether is, especially with the finals, it was just historic. You see the numbers that Kucherov and McDavid put up assist-wise in the regular season, and then in the Stanley Cup playoffs, obviously Connor McDavid going off, and the history could have been even more so if the Edmonton Oilers completed the reverse sweep in the finals, but that just didn't end up happening. But I just want to get your guys' opinion on one. Give me one word to sum up the Stanley Cup final altogether. Noah.
Unpredictable. Like I wanted the Oilers to win, and when they were down 3-0, I had absolutely no hope. I'm not gonna act like I was riding with them and saying that Connor McDavid's him and he's gonna come back in the series. I thought it would have been a gentleman's sweep and they would have got one, but when they made it to game 7, I had a little bit of hope that they were gonna do this. Canada was gonna break that 30-year drought. And it's just depressing to see that. Just like I said, the best playoffs, but arguably the worst ending. I don't know if you guys would agree.
Justin.
Ah, I think it was still a great ending. I mean,
Yeah.
coming down to game seven is always going to be a great ending, but I know what you mean about Canada
Exactly.
wanting to win. But for my one word, I think we kind of talked about it already. Entertaining. Obviously, even when it was 8-1 Edmonton in game 5 or game 4, sorry, it was still entertaining. Like there was no part of that you didn't want to watch. Like you didn't want to walk away from the TV or turn your head because then a goal was going to get scored or something crazy was going to happen. Two guys were going to fight or one team would start a comeback. So I think entertaining is the one word to sum up the entirety of that Stanley Cup final.
I'll say I'm definitely interested to see what the ratings are going to be, especially for that game 7 of the finals and just the finals as a whole. But let's dig a bit deeper into the champions of 2024. The Panthers get it done ultimately in the deciding game. What about this Panthers team stood out about you, and what will you remember about them in the future?
It's just the resilience that team had. Even when they got it to, or the Oilers got it to 3-3, and the Panthers almost seemed like they wanted a game 7. It's like they wanted the Oilers
Yeah,
to push back and
Yeah.
play in a seventh game. Like you even saw Paul Maurice, he said, nobody dreams about scoring the OT winner in game 4. It's in game 7. That's what you imagine when you're playing hockey as a young kid on your driveway. But this team is just incredibly memorable, from Sergei Bobrovsky in net to a leader like Kachuk, uh, Alexander Barkov being one of the best two-way forwards we've ever seen. It's an incredibly deep team. I think it's one of the best Stanley Cup winners of all time, and I think this is a team that could
wow. What a claim to
definitely come
make.
back.
I
They could
actually
come back
Stanley Cup
next year, do it
winners of
again.
all time.
I disagree. I think they're one of the weaker champions. I think their offense was exposed in those 3 games they lost against the Oilers, and their defense can get exposed. On paper, great team, but when Bobrovsky isn't at his best, that's when they're losing, and when he wasn't at their best in those 3 games. So I think they're heavily relied upon on their goaltending, and nothing wrong with that, right? You paid $10 million for a goaltender.
Yeah.
Nothing, you know what I mean, right? So, and when Bobrovsky signed that contract years ago, I was a hater. I said that he was washed and look at me now. But overall, I think Florida Put them up against Tampa in 2020, they're losing. Put them up against Vegas last year, they lost.
Colorado a few years ago would
Colorado,
demolish them.
maybe Washington, maybe, but that team was still defensive as well. They were underrated. So I don't know. I just think they didn't have much star power. Even though they won, it's kind of hard to say that, but yeah.
Justin, you
It was
seem like
almost
you're
like
about to jump in. Yeah,
Florida
go ahead.
Florida had a little bit of everything. They had a
Yeah.
great two-way player in Barkov, bruisers like Kachuk, Ekblad, their entire bottom six almost, and they had the goal
Bozo
scoring and
pulled through.
exactly. And Carter Verhaeghe put up 40 goals not that long ago. Sam Reinhart's coming off a 50-goal season. I think the team just has a little bit of everything. Sergei Bobrovsky's up for his third Vezina. I doubt he's going to win it, but up for a third Vezina, and he was definitely in the Conn Smythe race. I don't know. That's a very, very good team that I think will be back.
For me, I gotta say the thing I'll remember about this Panthers team in 2024 is Paul Maurice, to be honest with you. And all the interviews he did post Stanley Cup win were hilarious. Just him talking about, oh, I've never hugged this many sweaty men in one night in my life, and I'd like to see Winnipeg. That was heartfelt for
Yeah,
a
it
lot
was
of
good.
fans with the
Kind of
amount
weird
of
though. He said he wants to see them win next year.
yeah,
Like
that is. I did find that weird because wouldn't you, as a head coach, want to win the Stanley Cup again, go back to back? But I mean, it's
exactly.
Paul Maurice, and he says stuff like this all the time, and you could see the emotion in him after being tenured for 30 years as a head coach in the league and finally getting it done. So I think for me, Paul Maurice will stand out the most. But Noah, you mentioned a lot of the
Yeah.
teams in the past about them being potentially able to beat this year's Panthers team. You mentioned the Capitals, you
Yep.
mentioned the Lightning. But I do want to bring up in the last 7 years, four teams to win the Stanley Cup was their first franchise win in
Uh,
history. When you look at the Panthers this year, the Golden Knights last year, 2019 Blues, and 2018 Capitals. Do you think these teams getting their first franchise cup is good for the game of hockey, Justin?
Oh, it's 100% good for the game of hockey. You think back to when the Florida Panthers were running like the Nick Bukestad days, Jaromir Jagr. It was just kind of the joke was always the Panthers had what, six fans, but that building was full. If there was a bunch of Oilers fans in there or not, the game has completely grown in Florida. I believe it's now three out of the last four champs are from, or sorry, three out of the last five champs are
yep.
from Florida
From
Florida.
yeah.
in Tampa going back to back. And then they got there again the next year and Florida winning it this year. And Florida's been in the Stanley Cup final for the past 5 years. So
Yeah.
it's
I
just
mean,
growing so much in Florida. And you look at like in Washington, obviously there was already a great hockey fan base there, but getting to see Ovi lift that cup
Had to.
in St. Louis, it's growing everywhere. When you see a team win a championship, the entire city gets around it, almost no matter what sport it is. So of course it's great for the game.
just think about all the southern teams though. It's not just Florida, it's Dallas and it's Vegas. And it just feels like it's not a northern game anymore. It's reaching a lot of different types of fan bases. And even though, ice can't just naturally freeze in Dallas, it's still gonna be a lot of fans hopping on the wagon, and eventually 10 years from now, they're gonna be real fans.
Well, the Cup drought obviously stands for Canada at
Yeah.
30 plus years now. And we mentioned how it's so good that these southern markets are starting to get so much attention in the game of hockey. And the pain continues for Canada, but at least they did win something. Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe trophy. I just want to get your guys' thoughts. Do you think the voters got this one right? No. Do you think he deserved the Conn Smythe trophy?
Absolutely. After an historic season, he broke Gretzky's assist record, 5 points away from the overall record of 47 points in a single postseason. I think he was dominant at all times. Obviously, he wasn't, he kind of got shut down by JT Miller in the second round. The Barkov kind of shut him down in the first three games of this Stanley Cup Finals. But overall, he was the MVP, and he was more valuable to the Oilers than Bobrovsky to the Panthers or Barkov to the Panthers. And I think in a weird way, I know hockey's there's no pity awards, but in a weird way, it kind of felt like even if Barkov deserved it, you kind of had to give it to McDavid. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys would agree. It just felt like it was too storyline, and it would have been weird, especially after you break a record.
Yeah, I think that's the deciding factor right there. You
Yeah.
broke Gretzky's record. When you break Wayne Gretzky's record, it's pretty hard not to hand that guy the Conn Smythe. I think Alexander Barkov was right there, especially how he did shut down McDavid in game 6 and 7. But I think it's the record breaking that kind of sets him apart, and that's why he won the Conn Smythe. And I don't think this is going to be his only one.
I also want to point out that when I say like JT Miller shut down McDavid, you can't really shut down McDavid in a game. He's still going to get 5 or 6 good looks, but that
I thought you
just
were going to
speaks to how
say
good he
5 or 6 points, which is also
It's also possible, yeah. I
It's
mean,
also
you
possible too.
look at a team like the LA Kings. They've almost built their entire team to beat Connor McDavid,
Yeah.
and then him and the Oilers go out and beat them in five. Almost did it in four. So
I remember saying,
nobody could shut down Connor McDavid.
yeah, I remember saying Dano, Kopitar, Byfield, those guys are going to shut down McDavid this series, and look what happens. He beats them in 5.
Yeah.
so Connor McDavid wins the Conn Smythe, but he didn't return to the ice to accept it. Was that the right decision by the Oilers captain, Noah?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of like unclassy in a way if he did go accept it because he
I
deserves to be
agree.
with his team and he's the captain. It's a statement to not go, and it shows that, hey, like I'm still with you guys. I'm not gonna just gonna go out there and accept an award in front of not first off, it's not even in Edmonton. If it was in Edmonton, yes, I'd kind of be like, go out, say bye to the
For the
fans. But
fans.
yeah, exactly. But it was in Florida, and it just didn't feel right for him to go out. I think it was a perfect decision. It showed how classy he was as a captain and how much he puts his team first. You know? Oh,
Yeah, I think you got it there. No, it's kind of a we win together, we lose together type of thing for Connor McDavid. He's not going to abandon his team who's heartbroken. He's heartbroken himself, and you expect him to go out there and stand in front of an entire Florida crowd and stare the Panthers in the eyes as they're celebrating a cup
yeah.
championship. I think it's the right move for him to just stay where he was. But yeah, not surprised he's taking home that piece of hardware.
And to your point, Justin, about going in front of all those fans in South Florida, they were booing Connor McDavid when he was announced as the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. And also to Noah's point, I think it shows tremendous leadership skills when you're not going out to accept the individual award because obviously they're after the bigger one. So I have to agree with both of you. I think it was the right decision by Connor McDavid not to go out and accept the. It's not like he didn't accept the Conn Smythe Trophy; he just didn't go out and get it as
Yeah.
soon as he won it, which
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world in my eyes. But I want to get your guys' opinion on this because I've had this conversation with other people, Logan of the Backfield Buzz more specifically. Do you think Connor McDavid will come back next season and have the best season of his entire NHL career?
Regular season or playoffs?
Both.
Wow. Justin, you got to answer this.
Well, I
Gotta
think I
give-
think there's one thing Connor McDavid has learned, not only this season, but over the entirety of his career is as long as the Oilers get in, it doesn't really matter until the playoffs start. I think his game's gonna be very adjusted next year. I mean, it already was this year. I think even more so, he's gonna adjust his game, play more of a two-way game. He's not going out there looking to score 150 points because he learned he scored 150 points, and then they get bounced by Vegas in, I believe it was the second round. Uh, but yeah, I mean, he knows it doesn't matter until playoff time. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if he's gonna hit that 150 point mark. I mean, it's possible. Again, it's Connor McDavid. He can almost do whatever he wants. But I think when it comes to playoffs, I think he might have a better playoff run next year than he did this year if the Oilers team around him can help him get to the same spot, if not a Stanley Cup championship.
Yeah, I think before every season, we kind of don't expect what Connor McDavid's going to do. Like 2 seasons ago, he gets 64 goals, 60 goals. Last season, he got 100 assists. Like he kind of just picks and chooses what he wants to specialize in each season. But next season, I think, yeah, like you said, he's going to play more two-way. That's kind of what got them to the Cup final. But at the same time, like you don't really need him to put up 153 points to make the playoffs. You know that you're going to make it.
And you
And
know
I'm
the
sure.
guy's going to put up 130 points in his sleeper
Oh,
list.
130 points
Exactly.
at like least, even if he misses 15 games, something like that. But like once you make the playoffs, it shows that even though it kind of sounds hypocritical, McDavid's amazing, all the stuff he carried them to the finals, but his defensive play kind of contributed to the overall team's defensive play. The penalty kill was at like you can argue the penalty kill was more like was what kind of put them over the edge to beat Dallas and to almost beat Florida and to beat Vancouver.
In game
Um,
7. Right.
Exactly. So it's just so important for the entire team to buy into that. And I think that's why Sidney Crosby was so good, is because since he was so defensive, the entire team around him bought into that. At the same time, though, I still think McDavid's a hot take. I think he's more impactful. Just me. But yeah, I think he's gonna play better two-way next season.
I see that Crosby jersey
Yeah.
behind you,
I'm
Justin. You
sorry.
want to
I'm
you want to
sorry.
say anything about that?
Yes, there it is. That's a great point, Noah. Obviously, those are two superstars that do play a little bit different of a game. But again, it's Connor McDavid. He could do whatever he wants. So if he wants to become a shutdown Selke candidate next year, I wouldn't
He'll
put it
just
past
do
the
it.
guy.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, he like again, he could do whatever he wants. So yeah, if he could play similar to Sidney Crosby's game, then yeah, definitely. But he's also got the speed and skill. Quite honestly, probably a more skilled player than Crosby was.
Yeah.
Incredibly close, but yeah, I think he's got the skill to add on to that two-way game.
Yeah.
So, on the topic of McDavid, before we move on, do you think he'll leave the Oilers in a few years if they can't make it back to the Stanley Cup final? Do you think that goes through his mind, or do you think he stays until the job's done? Where do you think his head's at in terms of his contract and staying in Edmonton, Noah?
I think it's funny enough. I think we're gonna find the answer in about a year. It's gonna be quicker than we think. I think it's dependent on whether Draisaitl signs, and if he doesn't, I think McDavid calls it a career in Edmonton, and I don't know, goes to Chicago with Bedard or LA or something, some hotter climate.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Florida, maybe pay less taxes there. Maybe go to the Panthers.
Go to the team that beat him in the finals. I'm
Exactly.
not
If
sure
you
about
can't beat
that.
him, join him. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that. What's your take on it, Justin?
It's definitely an option. It definitely crosses through his mind. But at the end of the day, right now he's got unfinished business. And if you're a superstar like Connor McDavid is, the face of the NHL as of right now, you have to prove that you can win. And again, I think he's got that unfinished business. And quite honestly, I think him and Draisaitl are going to be there for a while. Compare it to Alex Ovechkin, who couldn't get out of that second round. There was rumors that maybe the Caps would move on from him, or maybe he'd like to go somewhere else, but it never happened, and he got his cup in 2018. I think we're going to see something similar with Connor McDavid.
I agree. I think he does want to stay in Edmonton until the job's done, but you never know what could happen in the next 2 years. You never know. Maybe Connor McDavid wants to come home and go to the Toronto Maple Leafs. You don't know what will
What
happen.
money they? What money there?
That's a topic for another day, the money. We'll get into Marner later, actually, and speak of the money there. But before we just quickly wrap up on the Stanley Cup Finals, one last question about it. Who do you think will get to the Stanley Cup Final again sooner, the Edmonton Oilers or Florida Panthers, Justin?
I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if we see the exact same Stanley Cup final next year, but I got to give it to the Panthers. I don't think their team's going to change all that much, and they've got all the pieces to where I think Edmonton, not to discredit them, they did have a few things go their way en route to where I think the Panthers have done it 2 years in a row. Why not make it three?
I have to agree with Justin. Even though even if Reinhardt leaves, I still think they're more of a complete team than the Oilers. And like you said, they've done it 2 years in a row. Why not go three times?
I'm gonna have to go with the Panthers as well. Just you've seen them President's Trophy 2 years ago, Stanley Cup final last year, lost, came back this year, got their redemption. They've been a competitive team for years now. And other than potentially losing Sam Reinhart maybe or Brandon Montour, they'll probably bring at least one of those guys back. I can see their team being competitive enough to get back to the Stanley Cup final. But congratulations to the Florida Panthers for the 2024 Stanley Cup victory. Time to move on now to some other news around the NHL. And I know this will spark Noah Simon's interest. Linus Ullmark traded to the Ottawa Senators for the 25th overall pick in this year's draft, Mark Kastelik, and Jonas Korpisalo at 25% retention. Noah, initial thoughts on the deal?
I think the deal is amazing for the Senators, and pretend they didn't get Allmark in the trade. Like just somehow they just traded some random. I think they win the trade no matter what because you got rid of the Korpisalo contract. And then you would get a Vezina winning goalie in return for a year and potentially get to sign him. That's more than a win for Ottawa. And for Boston, I just don't get it. Like I know Ottawa's returning 25%, but why would you even want to take on that contract? There's 4 more years left. I just don't know why Boston would do that.
I agree with the return. So, Justin, do you think this return was enough for Boston?
That that's tough because I think we're gonna find out when Linus Ullmark makes a decision if he wants to re-sign with the Senators.
Right.
If he does not re-sign with the Senators and it's just 1 year, then yeah, I do think it's a good return. You get back into the first round. Korpisalo was pretty decent behind a very good defense in Columbus when they had Seth Jones and Zach Werenski playing to their full capabilities. Playing behind Boston's defense, probably won't have to play that much behind Jeremy Swayman, maybe 20 games. I definitely think there's room for that Korpisalo contract to not look as bad. And yeah, you get back in the first round at 25th, which was originally Boston's pick. I think it's going to take some time to find out if this return was worth it. When you see it right away, you do look at it and go, kind of screw your face up a little bit for Boston, but I think only time will tell.
So Noah, do you agree with that? Do you think if Allmark doesn't resign after this next season, that Ottawa ultimately loses this trade?
No, so here's the thing is I think Corpusalo, like you said, I think there's a possibility that he plays well in Boston, or not, maybe not well, but has a little bit more confidence playing behind Swayman. And I think no matter what, if Allmark leaves after this season, it's just getting rid of that contract for Ottawa, who's kind of already tight on the cap, and they got to sign a bunch of guys soon. I think it's a win-win it's a win, but you kind of just took a massive L when you signed him last year. So it's kind of just evening out where you were before, and you're back to square one. You don't have a goalie. But I also think that Swedes love to play in Canada, and we've seen that in history. And I think there's a high
William
chance that
Nylander.
Hallmark signs. Sorry,
William Nylander loves playing
yeah,
in Canada.
the Deans, like you know what I mean.
So, a question for both of you. Now that the Ottawa Senators have a bona fide number one in Linus Allmark, can they make the jump into the playoffs this coming season, Justin?
I don't think they're there yet. They're very close. There's a lot of things that can move around in the Eastern Conference, especially with the wild card spots. But I think that spot's for the Detroit Red Wings. That they're just a little bit further than the Ottawa Senators, especially if they can get a goalie. I know they're looking at John Gibson as we speak. If they can pull something like that off, then I think it's Detroit's spot. The Sens could squeak in there, but I think they're right on the brink once again.
Well, you look at Detroit the last couple of days, they've made a couple moves in terms of freeing up cap space, moving on from their Jake Wallman contract just the other day. So, something's in the work there for Stevie Y, trying to bring in some other player to help make that wild card position, as you mentioned. But Noah, do you think the Senators can kind of upset them and squeak past them into that wild card spot or maybe even a division spot? What's your take?
It'll be tough. I think it's strictly dependent on their injuries and Josh Norris coming back. And as of right now, it's not looking good for him. So I personally think Ottawa is better on paper overall, but I don't think they're going to make it strictly because their injuries and it's just unpredictable.
So on the flip side of things, obviously Allmark going to the Senators to be the bona fide number one, and then you have Jonas Corposalo going to back up Jeremy Swayman. Noah, do you think that Jonas Corposalo can bounce back in the Bruins system?
Yeah, like when you're playing behind Swayman, I think it gives you a little bit more confidence that you don't have to be the starting goaltender. And Corpus at his best, he was never a superstar goaltender,
No.
and he's always playing behind decent backups and with decent backups. I mean, so I think right now, give him a little bit more confidence, and also Boston's system is so structured defensively that it allows goaltenders to succeed, and we've seen that in the last 15 years with their goaltenders. And obviously, Tim Thomas is unreal, but Tim Thomas, Rask, Swayman, Allmark, they've got lucky with their goaltenders. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
and I think they're able to succeed a little bit more because of how defensive they are, and that's just a props to the organization itself.
Now, not only are you playing behind a great system in Boston, Charlie McAvoy is on the ice for
Yeah.
almost 30 minutes a night. And then Hampus Lindholm, Brendan Carlo, who's a great shutdown guy. He's got better names in front of him, not to discredit that Ottawa defense, but it's pretty obvious that the Bruins are a little bit stronger in that aspect. So I think, again, similar to Columbus, where he had Jones or Renski in front of him, uh, it's a smaller workload, and I think it's going to make life easier for Corpusalo, which will translate to his play on the ice.
I agree with that, Justin. Also, you got to look at the coaching staff. I think the coaching staff in Boston might be a bit better than the coaching staff in Ottawa. So I think he might be able to thrive there a bit better. But moving on to a trade that happened about a week ago, Pierre-Luc Dubois to the Washington Capitals, 1-for-1 for Darcy Kemper. Do you think the Washington Capitals can be the team that finally figures out PLD, Noah?
I just don't get it. And honestly, no. Like there's no motivation for that guy, and especially playing in DC on a rebuilding team with that team's old and they're not getting any better anytime soon. Like, what are you trying to do with that contract? Like, even if he gets a little bit better and he plays really good and he helps offensively, like you need a tank. Or your number one goal is to get Ovechkin the goal record. So right now that made no sense to me. And there's a joke, circling around the internet. That's why they bought Cap Friendly, right? So no one can tell why no one can see PLD's contract because that contract is not good. It's sorry, what is it? 6 years, 7 years left, 7 years left.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous, and I don't think Washington D.C. will motivate him.
Now, this is an incredibly weird spot for the Capitals because, like you said, they're trying to get over the goal record. I think that's their main focus. So for the next about 2 or 3 seasons or so, or however long it takes them to get that record, they're stuck. They can't rebuild, and they're not going to be good enough to contend. So taking on that contract doesn't hurt the Capitals all that much. If you can get him back to what he was expected to be, that's awesome. It's definitely wishful thinking, but all you gave up was Darcy Kemper, who wasn't even their starter for a good chunk of last year, and went to Charlie Lindgren. And now PLD's job is simple: get in the corners and get the puck to Alex Ovechkin so he can break the goal record. Uh, it's just I don't know if he's being utilized right in LA playing behind Danault and Kopitar, and I know why he was playing behind Danault and Kopitar. I just don't think that was a fit. But if you're the LA Kings, you got to look at what you just gave up for Darcy Kemper. You gave up Pierre-Luc Dubois and all the stuff you gave up to get him, which was Gabriel Velarde, Rasmus Kupari,
Yeah.
first round pick, Alex Iafallo, all for an older goaltender that hasn't gotten back to what he was a few years ago, and I don't see him doing so anytime soon.
So moving on to another trade that was made on the same day as the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, it's Jacob Markstrom moved from Calgary to New Jersey for a 2025 first, sorry, and a defensive prospect in Kevin Ball. Do you guys like this trade for Calgary for New Jersey? Do you think a certain team won it, or is it just a good hockey deal, Justin?
Uh, when I first saw it, again, similar to the Allmark trade, you screw your face up a little bit and like just a first and ball for a guy that can put up close to Vezina numbers at times in Markstrom, but he's older and he's proven to be inconsistent. So you get a first round pick out of him. It's a solid hockey deal, like you posed, but that's exactly what New Jersey wants. I think they get the goaltender they want. They only really give up a first. So at the end of the day, probably New Jersey comes out on top. But again, Markstrom's getting older. You're not sure what you're going to get from him. He's been incredibly inconsistent at times, and the Devils can't really afford for him to be inconsistent with how competitive their division and how tough it is to get in the playoffs nowadays. So you just got to hope that Markstrom can play at the caliber that we saw him play towards the end of the season, and then if you're the Devils, you look like bandits coming out of that deal.
Noah, do you think that this trade makes the Devils a legit cup contender now?
I think it does, maybe for a year or two max. And I just found it kind of weird that the Devils like didn't go after Allmark as much. I think it's kind of weird that Boston didn't get a better offer from the Devils and they traded within their division to Ottawa.
Yeah,
Is that just weird to me? Because the
no,
Devils, I
weird,
feel like
weird
they
to
would
me
have
as
had way
well.
more assets to give up. Sorry.
It's weird to me as well, but
It's
I
just
mean, you go for the, I guess, the best deal that's put on the table, and I guess that's what Calgary did here.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think this pushes the Devils over the hump. I've always thought they were kind of frauds, and even though they have the players and the pieces to make the playoffs, even if they get in, I don't think they're a second round at best. I don't know.
Sorry,
Okay,
I want to
moving.
say something here. As we're talking about the trades, there seems to be some breaking news. Ilya Mikheyev, he's yet to waive his no movement clause, but he's going to the Chicago Blackhawks
Wow.
for a 2025 second and a 2027 fourth. Again, Mikheyev hasn't waived his no movement clause, but it says if he is to do so, the Blackhawks and Canucks have agreed to make the deal. Just waiting on Mikheyev. So
Wow,
that's an interesting one. I guess
Wow.
just some cap cleanup for the Canucks.
live
It's on
breaking
the cards
trades.
line.
Yeah, on the first
Live
episode, eh?
on the first episode, live breaking trades. Ilya Mikheyev sent off from the Canucks to the Chicago Blackhawks. Wow, what a trade! I don't really get that one, but I guess we'll see how it works in due time. But moving on from the news that's currently happening, I guess, right now, and the news that has been happening in the last week or so with the trades, free agency is next Monday, July 1st. So, just a quick this or that answer from both of you. Obviously, the Mitch Marner saga. Will he be traded? Will he be re signed by the Leafs? Just give me trade or signed. What do you think, Noah? Trade or signed for Mitch Marner?
Trade. Absolutely trade.
I think you definitely look to trade. Can't give that guy a raise after how Leaf fans feel about him.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna complete the sweep here. I think a trade is definitely needed. You might lose a trade if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, but obviously it hasn't worked having those core guys locked up with so much money. He wants reportedly William Nylander plus money, and that's just not going to work for the Leafs. But it's time to play a little game, guys. Before we move on to the draft, before we get out of here in episode number 1, I'm going to give you a upcoming UFA next Monday, July 1st. Give me the team you think that they will sign with, starting with Jake Gensel, Noah.
Vancouver. I think there's the rumors have been floating around, and I think they will have the money. And I just think that they need another top six forward that's superstar in the playoffs, and I think he fits their system perfectly. And I think Taka will love him, so I think Vancouver.
Well, it's proven that Taka does love him, and Jim Rutherford does as well. So I think
Yeah.
Vancouver is a great suitor, but keep an eye on the Detroit Red Wings. They've been looking for a goal scorer and just an elite player to play beside Dylan Larkin. Lucas Raymond seems to be coming into that, but I think Jake Gentz would be an incredible fit there, and I think Stevie Y has the money to do it. So you might see him pull the trigger.
Okay, now Sam Reinhart, the game-winning goal in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Where does he end up, Noah?
Uh, uh, you guys may sound I may sound crazy. I think he signs back in Florida. I think you just want a cup, and like you probably love those guys. And I know he's a 50 goal scorer, and he had 9 goals in the playoffs and scored the winning goal in the game, the Stanley Cup final game. But I think he needs to stay, and I think he wants to stay.
Yeah, I think he's going to stay as well. Come off that high of winning the cup. I believe he said that he wants to stay in Florida. So he probably could get paid more somewhere else, but I think you're looking at something like 8 times 8 in Florida, best case scenario for the
Yeah.
Panthers.
Steven Stamkos, where does he end up?
Boring answer again, but signs back in Tampa. I think he's a Tampa Bay Lightning for life. And I don't think, even though they don't have much cap, I think they're gonna squeeze him in. And he's also getting older, so I don't know how much he actually wants. He still has a few 30 goal seasons left in him, I think. But
Yeah,
at the same time, like you're the captain, and you've got your cups now, and you made the finals a few times. Like, why not just sign back, right?
I'm pretty sure me and Justin have the same answer here. Justin, you wanna?
Yes, I think we do, but again, it goes back to what I said. It depends where Jake Gensel goes. I think Stevie Y has his eyes set on Gensel, but if
I
he
think
can't get
so.
Gensel, then he's going to go for Steven Stamkos.
I think so.
And he's got the connection with Stevie Y there. Stamkos gets to play for an original six market, gets to bring up Detroit's younger guys. I think that's a great fit.
Yeah, I have to agree wholeheartedly. I think Stevie Y wants to bring back his prominent goal scorer in Steven Stamkos. I think he'll fit in Detroit's scheme. Obviously, look at what Patrick Kane did as a veteran this past season. He thrived there, almost point per game. And I think Stamkos could seamlessly fit in to that lineup. One more before we take a quick break before the draft previews our top tens each. We're gonna go with Elias Lindholm. Noah.
Oh wow. He's not going back to Vancouver. He wants way too much money. Goes back to Calgary.
All
I
right,
I
Justin.
I think I think Calgary has the money, and I don't know. I don't see him going back to Vancouver. That's for sure.
Justin,
I think
quick
he's going to
answer. What do you
Boston.
think? Boston.
Boston's had their eyes on him for a long time. This is their chance to get him. They need a center so desperately.
They do.
I think they pull the trigger on Elias Lindholm.
I completely agree. I think Lindholm's destination is the Boston Bruins. They need that center desperately. Quick break coming up, and then we're going to get into our top 10 draft rankings for the first round of the NHL draft in 2024. All right, gentlemen, it's time to get into our top 10 ranking for the draft coming up this weekend. The next coming of NHL superstars. So we've all put together a top 10 of our personal picks for what's going to happen in the top 10 of this first round. I'll give you guys the option. Do you want to go from 1 to 10? Because we're going to go one by one each per selection. Do you want to go 1 through 10 or 10 through 1?
Hmm.
I think we go the way of the draft. Go 1 through 10.
1 through 10? Okay. Noah, you're first up. First overall selection. Who are you taking?
Who could
I
it
probably
be?
I thought about this all night. It took me a while. But I probably have to go. You know that kid from North Van,
Yeah,
Mac
yeah.
Celebrini. San Jose Sharks will select him. Obviously, like not much needed to be said right now. Like pretty basic. He's gonna go number one. It's one of those things where he's not as concrete as like Connor Bedard was last year, but he's pretty concrete. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No disagreements there. I
He
have
has a
Macklin celebrating.
Zero.
yeah.
Yeah, as well. It's again, like you said, might not be generational, but he's gonna be pretty close, I think.
Yeah.
He's the undisputed consensus number one, and like you said, obviously not as consensus as Connor Bedard, but we could have skipped number one, to be honest with everybody watching this. It's gonna be Macklin celebrating. If it's not, we'll delete the Hive Podcast Network. Something like that. Okay, number two, gentlemen. I'll let you go first, Justin. Who you got going after Macklin celebrating in the draft?
So this is a really interesting spot, as I think what the Blackhawks decide to do can shape out probably the entire top 10 to 15. It depends. Do they trust Kevin Korchinski to be their number one defenseman of the future and a guy like Alex Vlasic? I think they do, and I think they take Ivan Demidov. If not, they can definitely look at a defenseman because there's a whole lot of them in this draft. But if you can pick a guy that's going to be the 1-2 punch with Bedard for the next 10 plus years,
Yeah.
you don't get that very often.
I completely agree with you. Obviously, like you said, it is a defenseman heavy draft. There's a lot of good defensemen in this draft, a lot of offensive defensemen that are good in this draft, except one, which we'll all get to later, I'm sure, in the top 10. But Ivan Demidov is the clear cut second best skill set player in this draft for me, and him playmaking alongside Bedard is a no brainer if you're Kyle Davidson in Chicago. I got Ivan Demidov too. Do you agree, Noah?
Yeah, Demidov second. I think he'll be, I mean, not the same role, but like he'll be the Malkin to the Crosby, the Draisaitl to the McDavid,
The
and then
Robin to the Batman.
exactly he'll be that to Bedard, and I think they really need a better top six, better top line because that their roster is arguably still an AHL roster. That's still an atrocious roster, and they'll still be bottom three next year, no doubt about it. No matter who comes in on that team, even if Mikheyev gets an 100-point season. But yeah, he'll be second overall.
Okay, now we get to number three, and I guess you guys both started already once. I'll go first this time for the Anaheim Ducks at number three. I have them taking centerman Caden Lindstrom, and there is reason behind this. Obviously, there's other guys that may be slightly better to go ahead of Lindstrom when you look at Artem Levshunov and guys like that. But I think it's a positional need for the Anaheim Ducks. I think their defensive prospects are already there and already amazing. When you look at Pavel Mintyukov, you look at Tristan Leno, Olin Zellweger is going to be phenomenal. Both him and Mintyukov have gotten a taste in the NHL and have looked solid on a struggling Ducks team. So I think they want to bolster their forwards in terms of prospects, and they already got a lot. Trevor Zegras obviously starting to round into form. You got Mason McTavish, got other guys like that, but I think they want to add a forward up front. So I'm going with Caden Lindstrom at number three. Justin, who do you got?
I find that very interesting that you
Yeah.
say they go with a forward based off their positional needs because I think it's the other way around. I think
Wow,
they already have Cutter Gauthier, Leo
I
Carlson,
didn't even mention
Mason
those guys.
McTavish,
Yeah,
Trevor Zegras. They have Pavel Minchikov and Olin Zellweger, but do you trust, I guess, Minchikov to be your true cut number one going
maybe.
forward? I'm not sure if you do. That's why I'm taking Artem Levshinov. I think he's the most complete defenseman in the draft. He has an incredible two-way game, and I think he is their future number one. You can even pair him with Minchikov. Uh, you've got him or Zellweger to run the power play, and I think they already have their forwards. I think they go for a defenseman here, and I think they're really praying the Blackhawks take Demidov at number two, so they can't take Levshinov at three.
Right.
Completely agree with Justin. Levshinov is going third because I don't trust that Ducks defense. Even though they're not set, they're not all NHL ready. I think Levshinov is the only NHL ready defenseman in the top 10. And personally, just in my opinion, I think he's also the only right-handed defenseman. And a lot of teams want that, and I think that's very valuable in this draft. And he just matured, and I'll say the comparisons to Charlie McAvoy. And McAvoy, one of the best defensemen in the league. He just plays with such a physical game. And yeah, I think he's going third.
So you guys both have Levshunov at three. So Noah, who do you got at number four? Going to
Zane Parekh. I
the
think the
Columbus
Blue
Blue.
Jackets need, yeah, the Blue Jackets need some help on their D. I think Werenski he's kind of carrying that defense core right now with Jones. He left a few years ago and it's kind of just been hung out to dry. And I think their offense is on the come up. They have a bunch of prospects in the system and a few guys doing well right now. Ken Johnson, Fantilli. But I think he's like we've all heard that thing about him, how he's like the smartest player in the draft, his IQ on the ice, and obviously super skilled. And I think that's exactly what the Blue Jackets need right now.
Justin.
See, mine's interesting here because it's a different player for me, Noah, but for all the same reasons. I think a lot of guys are a little bit lower on this guy than I am, and that's Zeev Boyum. I think he's going to go number 4 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. An incredible offensive defenseman. Again, I think I'm a little bit higher on him than some people, but I think he's going
Definitely
to have a
higher than
very
I am.
long NHL career, quarterbacking that power play for the Blue Jackets. They already have David Jiricek who could play the shutdown role, and Z Boym can go do whatever he wants. I wouldn't be shocked if they go Parekh. I think that's a great pick as well. I think you can flip flop between those two guys, but personally,
Yeah.
I prefer Z Boym and his offensive upside.
In my ranking with obviously Artem Levshinov falling from the 3 spot where you guys both had him. I have him falling right into number 4 with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I think if he's available at 4 where the Blue Jackets are picking, I think it's a no-brainer for them to go and grab him. Like you said, a very complete defenseman, a very good two-way puck mover, and if he's around at 4, I don't see why the Blue Jackets would pass up on the opportunity to pick him. But at number 5 is the Montreal Canadiens. A lot of different ways that they can go with this. Justin, where do you think that they do go?
Now, this is a guy you already mentioned, Caden Lidstrom. I think if he falls to number 5, I think the Montreal Canadiens definitely take him. Their defense is already set up for the future. Lane Hudson, yeah, Caden Gooley, Justin Barron, Jordan Harris. The
David
defense is there.
Reinbacher.
Yeah, David Ryan, but I didn't even mention him. So yeah, the defense is there. I think because you look back to last offseason where the Montreal Canadiens really wanted Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think Caden Lidstrom is almost going to come up and be what Dubois was supposed to be. And I think that could be very good for the Montreal Canadiens to play behind Nick Suzuki, if not in front of him.
Who you got, Noah? Montreal
Yeah,
at
yeah,
5.
exactly. He's the same with Justin. Lindstrom. I think he falls a little bit. I think we see a lot of guys like this in the draft, big guys, 6'4", who they're obviously skilled, but they dominate more in the OHL because they're big, and once they get to the NHL, they have trouble transitioning. But I think he's the real deal, but I don't think he's top 3 worthy. And also, I think that Montreal still lacks size, even with Slafkovsky. I still think Caulfield and Suzuki, who are going to be, in the when you're pulling the goalie and the 6 guys on the ice, they're small guys, and I don't know if you I don't know if you want that. I think you need some size, and I think he's that guy.
For me, kind of like you at 4, Justin, with Columbus and Zeev Boyum, I have a bit of a jump for the Montreal Canadiens as well because I agree with you that it's a positional need and their defense is kind of set going into the future with those guys that we listed off. So I think they want to go for a forward here in the draft. And for mine, with Caden Lindstrom being off of the board at number 3 to Anaheim, I have Montreal kind of going off the board a bit and taking Berkeley Catton at number 5. I think he's a very overlooked player, very solid offensive threat, had a great year this past season in the WHL. So I think he can push a spot for this roster in the next few years, honestly, with how complete he is as a player and how much of a threat he is when he's on the ice. So I have them jumping up to take Berkeley Catton at number 5. Number 6 is Utah, their first ever franchise selection in the draft. Noah, who do you think that they'll be going with?
Beckett Seneca, I think he's gonna be a steal in this draft, and we've already seen him jump up a lot of spots. And there's also been rumors where Anaheim takes him third, or some speculation. I don't know if I buy that, but I think he'll go 6. And I think we've all seen the comparisons, just big 6'2", right-handed, right wing, just absolutely so skilled. Looks like Drake Batherson. That's the comparison we see of him, and he's a great skater. I just think he'll be a steal, and it's kind of what Utah needs, or formerly Arizona. Their top 6 is still not good enough to make the playoffs, and they have guys. They have Cooley, Keller. They're also small as well, and you need a bigger guy. But I think Seneca's perfect for that.
I do disagree with you there, Noah. I think they go for a defenseman in Sam Dickinson. I think like you said, they have Logan Cooley, they have Gunther, they have Clayton Keller's already a stud,
Josh
and
Bell.
Daniel Booth. Their offense is there. I think when you get a big 6'2", solid two-way defenseman that Sam Dickinson is, I think that's a guy that's just set up to have a very long NHL career. As a top pairing defenseman, it's maybe not the flashiest pick, but I think it's the safest pick. I think Sam Dickinson is one of the safer picks in the draft. That's a guaranteed guy to play in your top four for a long time to come. And I think that's what the Utah Hockey Club sees him as.
I wish I could put more words into that statement, but all of those things you just said, Justin, is exactly why I also have Sam Dickinson going to Utah at number 6 and being their first franchise draft pick. Just you can't really go wrong. You know he's going to be a reliable, steady defenseman, and you can't really mess up that pick if you're taking Sam Dickinson. Phenomenal year with London and just a shutdown guy. I think he's the perfect fit to be the first draft pick in Utah Hockey Club franchise history. Number 7, the Ottawa Senators. Noah, who are your Ottawa Senators going to take at 7?
I just want to preface before I say my answer. I think you know how they say the team should pick the best player, not the position they need. I
Right.
think the Sens are going to choose, in my opinion, the best player, and this may be controversial. They're gonna choose TJ Ginla, over Dickinson and Boyum. And I think only because they're left-handed defensemen and they already have too many of those with Chick and Shaban and Sanderson, and they're gonna move one out for a right-handed defenseman. So they don't need they don't need to draft one. They're gonna trade for one that's already developed. And it's win now moment. It's win now time. It's playoff now time. And I think Tej and Gillen will contribute to that top 6 who's already very skilled. And also because Norris is out, their top 6 is also looking a little stale and potentially looking weaker than it should have been because he's out. I think Tej is incredibly skilled. He has some size to him. And overall, it's Jerome and Gillen's kid. And you obviously want a guy like that in your organization. And I think the Sens will draft him.
I find that interesting as well, but I think they take the best player on the board in my mock draft. Would you agree he would be the best player on the board if he was still there? And that's Zane Parekh. I know he's a defenseman, but he shoots right, which is, as you mentioned, they have such a great left side.
Yeah.
I could see them taking a forward and, yeah, like you said, just trading for a right-handed defenseman. But Zane Parekh, right-handed defenseman, they're hard to come by nowadays. And like you said, an incredible hockey IQ. He can run your power play for years to come. It depends if you want to give that job to him or you have full trust in Jake Sanderson,
Yep.
what roles you want to give those two guys. But yeah, like I said, a future power play quarterback for a very long time to come, can play on your top pairing and move the puck incredibly well up to Tim Stützle, Josh Norris once he's back, and Drake Batherson, guys like that. But the Sens are in a bit of a weird spot. Like you said, it's kind of win now mode. And I think Zane Parekh is one of the closer guys to being NHL ready.
Man, Justin, these last 2 picks you've been taking all of the words along with the picks right out of my mouth because I also think that the Senators will go with Zane Parekh at number 7. Like you said, I think he checks a lot of boxes for the Ottawa Senators. Like you said, being just on the cusp of being probably NHL ready, right-handed shot could be paired nicely with Jake Sanderson. He, like I said, checks a lot of boxes. Maybe not the best defensive defenseman. Obviously, nobody really is except Sam Dickinson in this draft. And with my draft having him at 6, just ahead of Ottawa, I think Zane Parex's one of the best players available then at number 7. And he also fits positional needs for Ottawa as well. And with them being in that win now mode, I think Zane Parekh is the obvious choice for Ottawa if he's available at 7. But at number 8, who do you guys have going to the Seattle Kraken? Justin.
Hopefully, I'm not stealing your pick again, Kerwin, but I've got Anton Silyev if he's there going to the Seattle Kraken.
You
No,
didn't take
not
my
that
pick
time.
this time. Not this time.
All right. Well, this could be a risky pick for the Kraken. And I think a lot of NHL GMs are looking at this guy and seeing, ooh, 6'7" at 18. Let's get this guy on the roster.
Yeah.
But what if he fails? That's the other side of it. But when you're 6'7", it's pretty hard to do that, especially with how good he is defensively. 74 block shots in the KHL, led his team with 98 hits as at 18. So I think Silyev can be a cornerstone for the Seattle Kraken, who have Matty Beniers and Shane Wright up front. They're slowly building something. Don't have too many prospects, and I believe Riker Evans is their best defensive prospect, so I think you'd like an upgrade there. And if Silyev's on the board, I think you take him.
No, who do you got taken by the Seattle Kraken?
Zeev Boyum. Was never really big on him coming into this draft, and mainly because of his size. And we've seen a lot of defensemen who are smaller who just don't pan out because of their size. Kind of reminds me of like a Brandstrom. I don't know if you guys would agree on that, but yeah, I think he'll fall a lot. I think Seattle needs defense, and right now, if you need defense, I think you also need a little bit of offense, and he provides both. Best case scenario if he pans out, so I'm gonna take him, but I've never really been that big on him.
For me, at 8 to Seattle, this is going to make a lot of Calgary fans very upset, but I think they're going to snag TJ Ginla right out from under them, a pick before Calgary picks at 9. I think Seattle is going to take TJ Ginla at number 8, one of the best players available if he drops down to 8. I know, Noah, you had him going a bit earlier to the Senators, a couple picks earlier, but a lot of people overlooked T. Ginla early on in his career, in his junior career, and then this past season, he's kind of proven to the haters that he's a complete player and he has the work ethic. He goes out there and gives it his 100% every night, just like his father, Jerome McGinley, did. And
Yeah.
it's not going to make Flames fans happy, but I think even though Seattle probably does, like you said, need to improve on their defensive prospects with already having Matty Benier, Shane Wright, and Rakoff, those kind of guys coming up and into their system. I think if TJ Ginla's around, I think they're willing to take the shot on his upside. But at number 9, those Calgary Flames missing out on TJ Ginla in my rankings. But who are they getting in yours, Noah?
Sam Dickinson, I think he fits their play style, and also right now, you can argue they're not even in win now mode, and they're kind of just in purgatory. They're not good enough to win the cup, and they're not bad enough to tank. But I think him and Anderson can be such a dynamic duo on defense, and I think right now, if they both play together, and also Sam Dickinson, I said that Lev Shinab was the only developed defenseman in the top 10, but he's probably the next closest in my opinion, just because of his size. I think um I think that'll be a massive to Calgary.
See, mine's a little bit different than Kerwin's. I think things pan out perfectly for the Flames, and they do get TJ Ginla at number 9. I think if Ginla's on the board at 9, the Flames don't think twice about it. The name value's there. He's got the bloodline, and of course, what Jerome did for Calgary and how long he was a Flame for and how good he was. Uh, I think they just take TJ Ginla and hope that he pans out the same way, if not better.
For me, at number 9, I'm also going to have to go with Anton Siliev to the Calgary Flames. I mean, if he's available, like Noah said, probably the second most developed defenseman in the draft after Levshunov. I think it's a no-brainer for them. Obviously, they just need to build everywhere. It's not really a positional need for Calgary, like Noah said. They're not good enough to win the cup. They're not bad enough to even be in the bottom 5 in the NHL. They'll probably be in a wild card race until the last quarter of the season. So at this point, you just want to build that prospect pool up in any way you can. And I think if Anton Siliev, a lot of people have him going higher in the draft. Some people think he might even go top 5 because after really Macklin Celebrini at 1 and maybe Demidov at 2, it's a very wide open draft. So I think if Celia's around at 9, Calgary won't think twice about grabbing him. New Jersey picks at 10, Justin. Who do you think they are going to pick at 10?
This is where I think Beckett Seneca goes. The Devils are similar to the Flames, but in a little bit better of a spot where their team set, their core set for the future. It's just they did have a disappointing season. You look at the defense, there's Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec are running that defense for the next 10 years. Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes are the 1-2 center for a long time. They have some wingers and Jesper Bratt, Timo Meyer, but don't get me wrong, but even a guy like Alexander Holtz, but Seneca brings the 6'2 frame, just a great guy to put in your top 6, playing beside either Hughes or Hischier. He's going to have a lot of success there. He's a big body again, 6'2". I just think if the Devils want to get anything, it's probably a winger, and his name's Bennett Seneca if he's on the board.
No, what do you think?
Well, I always get this name wrong with Berkeley Catton. Going to the New Jersey Devils. I kind of seem like a hypocrite because I always say you shouldn't add a small forward if your team is small, but I think the way the New Jersey Devils are going to be good is if their teams just they're going to outskill you, and right now they're not a big team, and with Jack Hughes up front, I think he can help down the middle, and I just think we talked about earlier, Markstrom's in net now, so you have a lot of layers to that team, and I think he'll be really skilled up front.
For me, you guys have both listed him already. I have him dropping a bit down to number 10, but making the top 10, and that's Zeev Boyum. And if he's around at 10, no doubt that New Jersey's going to want to pick him up, add to their defensive prospects. Obviously, you just mentioned the Markstrom trade, and they lose some defensive depth in that, losing Kevin Ball. So you're going to want to try and replenish that right away. And if Zeev Boyum's around, he's a very talented offensive guy, could be that next power play quarterback for the New Jersey Devils going forward in the future, to play with the likes of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt. And you never know, Alexander Holtz may find his footing and be the sniper that they predicted that he would when they drafted him years ago. So for me, it's Zeev Boyum at number 10. Is there any other shoutouts, do you think, to go to between the 10 and 15 range that could be a steal?
There's definitely a guy like Kalanius who could get up into there. Not one I can think off the top of my head, but honestly, this draft, you said 1 and 2 are locks. I don't even know if two's a lock. It's
Yeah,
2 to 15 could
Yeah,
be anywhere. Like if Chicago wants to go after a defenseman, Dog could fall all the way to Montreal. I could see. So it's wide open from 2 to 15. I'm just
Montreal.
excited to see what happens. Sorry.
You think that he's gonna fall that much?
There's a possibility if you look at like Columbus want a defenseman, Chicago wants a defenseman, Anaheim maybe takes Seneca like they were saying, and then Demidov's there at 5, and then Lidstrom falls even more. So there's so many different case scenarios with this
that's
draft.
definitely an option. But for me, I don't know if I'm just looking at things wrong, but I think Anaheim really wants a forward in this draft. Even though
Yeah.
it's defensive heavy, I think Anaheim does want a forward. But like you said, from 2 to 15, I could see absolute hell breaking loose and anybody going anywhere. So another name you mentioned, Consta Hellenius. I think he could be a steal in the 10 to 15 range. And also Cole Eiserman obviously needs to figure out some bumps and bruises to his game as far as defense and away from the puck, some laziness. Obviously, his shot is maybe the best in this draft class, but there's a lot of things to figure out. But besides Hellenius and Cole Eiserman, are those the only two kind of steals you could think of in that range, Noah? Anybody else come to mind, or just those two?
Yeah, honestly, not really. I think this draft is so top heavy, and the top 10 is kind of going to be, I'm not saying all NHL locks, but compared to other drafts, it doesn't even come close to the 2015 draft at all, in my opinion. Like, no, it's one of the worst drafts in recent years, but like I said, it's top heavy, and the good ones will be really good.
We'll just have to wait and see what actually unfolds and who goes where at the 2024 NHL entry draft, happening Friday for round one, and the rest of the drafts following on Saturday. Free agency is Monday. It seems like things are just completely rolling along now that the Stanley Cup finals are over and the Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. It's going to be a crazy couple weeks in the NHL offseason. Elliot Friedman predicted it at the end of the Stanley Cup final. No better place to be to get all the news and all the breakdowns than the Hive Podcast Network. We'll be back next week talking about free agency, talking about what went down in the draft, and anything more in terms of trades or any other news coming out of the NHL. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching What's Buzzin' on the Hive Network podcast. Take care, everyone.